Coming to Guelph wasn't a choice for me. I was an immigrant to Guelph. Originally, I was born in Sri Lanka, and because of an escalating political situation and an escalating civil war, both of my parents were human rights activists, and so at one point it became no longer safe for us to stay there. And so eventually we moved to the United States because my dad was a journalist. He was brought over by the Committee to Protect Journalists. But then after a year, we were basically asked to leave and go back home, but there was no way for us to safely go back home. And so Canada seemed like the next best option because we had family here and we knew that it was a lot more inclusive to immigrants and refugees. And so one of my dad's friends actually lived in Guelph. And so he told us to come here and that it was a safe, small city. Unlike Toronto, which had a lot more of a Tamil population and people who were still not safe for my dad to be around. So we moved to Guelph, and the city kind of fit us because it has this kind of social justice spirit to it. So both my parents, we moved here and never left. We came in 2004. And like many immigrants and refugees that moved to this city, we lived on Willow Road in the Onward Willow area. So we moved here and never left. I think it kind of suit our spirit and what we were about and how I was raised. So I've always stayed here since I went away for school and then came back. I think we in Guelph have this idea that because we are not as bad as some other places, that we are perfect, that we don't have any problems. And I think there's this idea that Guelph is some kind of like, we live in kind of like a snow globe of sorts. And it's not the case. I think that kind of thinking about our city, it's a great city. It's far better than many other cities, and we're very lucky to be in this city. I certainly feel that way. But it doesn't mean that we don't have work to do. And especially looking at, if we're talking about police brutality and racial inequality and class inequality, it exists within Guelph, right? And we can't ignore that over the past 5 to 10 years, this city, we have some work to do here, right? Like we have the opioid crisis has increased and homelessness has increased in Guelph. And when I moved here, if somebody had told me that we would have a drug problem in Guelph and that we would have homeless people where you can visibly see the amount of homeless people in Guelph, it wouldn't have been something that I would have believed. So I think social justice for me is a way of life. It's not something I decide to do when something comes up. It's just the way that I've been raised to live my life because of who my parents are and how they live their lives. It's very much in service to your community and the people around you. And so I try to involve myself in building up my community wherever I can see space. Growing up on Willow Road, there were perceptions of the people that lived there, that it was an unsafe neighborhood, that it was the ghetto, and all of these kind of perceptions of this neighborhood that I never felt because it was that was my safe haven, right? And that was the neighborhood that raised me, and I am who I am today because of those people and the people who work in that neighborhood who don't do it for the money. They do it because they love it, and they do it because they want to build up that neighborhood and the youth in that neighborhood. So in order to, once I, kind of was educated in film, I wanted to give some of that back to the community. So I last year started a program where I teach film and photography to youth in that community. So I worked at St. Joseph Catholic School last year and ran a photography and film program. And the program is basically about social activism and community engagement through telling stories. And these youth, and giving these youth a space and an opportunity to tell their stories about the experiences that they have had, as most of those youth are also immigrants. and what they see and what they witness in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and in their families.